According to the Holy Scriptures, Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High, is set to bring immortality to the nation of Israel, the elect, via establishing the tabernacle of David, as we talk about the second coming of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. He is coming to take down this current world ruled by Esau, Edom, and establish a righteous kingdom, which is synonymous with the throne of David. That's scriptural, which is a government that's going to run this world in righteousness.
After this manner therefore pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
A transfer of rulership is coming, and the kingdom of heaven will be on earth. Righteousness will be spread throughout the whole four corners of the earth. Wickedness will be put down. Eternal life. That's what's promised to the elect. All right, all Israel, but it starts with the elect. And that's how the earth will be governed by immortals, perfect angelic forces who are going to come down and rule on earth. Extraterrestrial bodies will be able to do things that humans do, but in heavenly bodies, like eating, drinking. Did not Yahweh Shai say he's going to drink wine with us in the kingdom? Well, how do you drink wine with a spiritual body? Well, we're going to have out of this world capabilities in those new bodies.
All right. Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rakakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth and this sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful leg, the believers, the listeners, whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. All right, and what I want to get into today, is dealing with a war with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay, which this was declared by the Heavenly Father in the book of Exodus, which we'll get into, that he will have war, all right, with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay, and we're going to go throughout, the Bible goes to different accounts, with Amalek, which is, all right, a part of the nation of Edom, okay, which, just as Judah, is the head, of the nation of Israel, with Amalek, he become the chief of the nation of Edom, okay, and it will always be major conflict, okay, between the Israelites and the Edomites, and Amalek, okay, will always be in the mix at the forefront. Okay, they would always be in the forefront, all right, when it came to this rivalry between, all right, the nation of Israel, all right, and Esau, these Edomites. Okay, so let's go here, because dealing with prophecy, okay, as the Lord, you go throughout the Bible, the Lord of some need devil's rulership up, okay, in one precept. Okay, when you go to Numbers 24 and 20, which is a heavy chapter. All right, we'll just read Numbers 24 and 20 says, and when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Okay, so Amalek, all right, as the scripture says, should be the first of the nations, and it was the first of the nations to attack, Israel, as we were coming out of Egypt. Okay, it was the first amongst the Edomites to become a superpower in the earth under the Greeks, to have an empire, and to be over other governments of the earth. Okay, and then in this time, Amalek is at the forefront of the nations today. Okay, when you look at these elite bankers, these oligarchs that run the earth, well, these nations answer to Amalek. All right, it's his banking system that runs the world. Okay, the enchantments, the witchcraft, sorcery. Well, Amalek is the chief of that amongst these nations. Okay, so he's become the first of the nations in the latter end. Okay, but now we're in a time where he's getting ready to perish, man. His rulership is going to perish. All right, and after 1,000 years of captivity, okay, Amalek, along with the rest of the Edomites, are going to perish forever. Okay, and the Lord said this a few times. Now, let's go back and just go through these accounts. All right, dealing with Amalek. Okay, how they was always, at the forefront, the main antagonist, okay, against Israel. Okay, so when you go to Genesis, much like not Genesis, Exodus 17 and 8, it said, then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek tomorrow, and I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of the Most High in my hand. So we're fresh out of Egypt, all right? And the first hostile nation that we encounter is no other than Amalek, man. Okay? So when you go here, keep reading on. So Joshua, okay, when she was under Moses, Joshua was a captain, the host at the time, all right, and he would become, the leader of all Israel after the death of Moses. Okay, going to the book of Joshua. So Joshua did as Moses, all right, had said to him, and fought with Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took stones and put it under him, and he sat thereon, and Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the, it says, and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Okay, so as long as Moses, okay, hands was lifted, okay, he was able to lift, his hands, Israel will win. Okay, but his hands kept getting weary and they kept falling, so they came up with a strategy. Well, look, we gotta keep Moses' hands up. Okay, and Moses, which he was the head, the chief. All right, and then Moses, he was the standard. He represented the standard. The law came, from Yahweh by Shema Shah through Moses. Okay, so long as that standard was lifted, all right, which is likened unto a banner, which is going to go into it. We're tied into prophecy. Okay, but as long as Moses' hands were lifted, we will get the ups, man. Okay, and that's why now in the latter time, as we're, exalting Yahweh Bashim Al Shah in the earth, we're beginning to get the ups on this devil, man. All right, to where everything is working against this nigga, man. Exodus 17 and 13, it says, and Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance from Amalek from under heaven, man, which is in the earth, man. So it's the second time the Lord done said, look, I'm going to put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, man. Okay, and that's the rest of you Edomites included. But Amalek is the one that keeps up the most havoc amongst these Edomites, man. It's gonna be Amalek that's gonna start this third war. It's gonna be Amalek that's gonna start this third war, man. So it's Amalek that keeps up the most havoc amongst, all right, the the nations of the earth, man. You know, and the Lord singles Amalek out, man. Is putting them out of remembrance, man, because it's their wicked influence that runs the earth, their witchcraft and their sorcery, man. Okay, their money magic. Okay, they're behind all these wars of the earth, man. You know, so the Lord has said a second time that He gonna put the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, man. Verse Exodus 17 and 15 says, and Moses built an altar and called the name of it Yahweh Nasa, all right, which is Yahweh is my banner. Okay, let's go into it real quick. Just to get it. All right. So it's two words, as you can see the word Yahweh. All right. And then you got uh Nasayah. All right. Nasayah, Yahweh Nasayah. Okay. Which is what? Yahweh is my banner. Okay. Now, let's keep reading. It says, and Moses built an altar and called the name of Yahweh Nasa. For he said, because the Lord Yahweh Bashem shall have sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Okay, so there will be a ongoing, all right, war. And feud with Amalek. Now Amalek can't, okay, affect. He's not able to directly attack the Most High. Okay, that's not even that's not even possible. Okay, that's something they can't even begin to do. But what do? Amalek, they destroy creation, all right, and they destroy the Lord's people. Okay, they're always an antagonist. Okay, and they're always in opposition. Okay, and plotting and scheming on the Lord's people, man. Okay, so when you go here, all right, when you go to do the running, and the Lord is always calling these niggas out, man. Even before it do the running me, let me get that in. Let's get this in Numbers. All right. So let's get this in the book of Numbers, chapter 14. So you go to Numbers 14 and 40, start at 49. So this is when the Lord had Moses to cuss Jake out, man. To rebuke Jake for being cowards and not having faith in Yahweh Bashem Shai when it was time for them to go into the land of Canaan. You know, and Jake, went Moses sent out those spies. All right, and only Caleb, came back with a report of faith, saying that look, let's go take that land. The Lord promised it to us. Okay, so Caleb came back, with a faithful report, and trusting in Yahweh Bashem Shai. And the Lord, said Caleb, his spirit different, but these niggas, man, these niggas not going to see the land. Okay, so Moses is rebuking them niggas, and Jake is hurt in their feelings. So they like, well, we just gonna go to war then. Nigga pouting, emotional. So nigga like, man, we just gonna go anyway. But nah, the Lord already said what he said, that look, y'all niggas not gonna see the land. And y'all failed the test. Okay, so Jake, they want to go and try to take the land anyway. Okay, but guess who's there with the people of Canaan? So you go to Numbers 14 and 39. It says, Moses told these sayings unto all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And they rose up early in the morning and got them up into the top of the mountain, saying, lo, we be here, and we will go up unto the place which the Lord have promised. All right, for we have sinned. And Moses said, wherefore now do you transgress the commandments of the Lord? All right, but it shall not prosper. And so Moses like, look, y'all can't go now. Y'all, the Lord already said what he said. Y'all ain't got no faith. The Lord ain't gonna be with y'all, man. It says, go not up, for the Lord is not among you, that you be not smitten before your enemies. for the Amalekites and the Canaanites. You see how intertwined Esau is with these goddamn Canaanites. As you go back to Genesis 35, or where you see Esau, all right, he marries into, okay, these Canaanites. He has two Canaanite wives, man. Okay, and you see, you get down to Numbers, all right. Amalek is heavily into Canaan, man. All right, which they was into that nasty, freaky loot. Okay, and you see that today. All right, these small hats, what they on. All right, it said, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and ye shall fall by the sword, because you are turned away from the Lord. Therefore, the Lord will not be with you, because they show no faith, and the Lord not dealing with no faithless, okay, mission, man. Okay, verse 4, yeah, verse 44 said, what they presumed to go up on to the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant and the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp. Then the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in their hill, and smote them and discomfited them, even unto Hamar. All right, so Jake, they got overwhelmed. All right, and it was Amalek and these Canaanites. Was because the Lord wasn't with that mission, man. Okay, because they had already failed the test. Okay, but just to show, you see these Amalekites, all right, are right here with these Canaanites, man. Show you that connection. Okay, so um, let's go from there. Let's get this in Deuteronomy 25. All right, this is Deuteronomy 25 and 17. It said, remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way when you come forth out of Egypt, you know, because you had another count when Amalek won't let Jake go by the king's highway, to get to the land. All right, they made them go around, which made, the journey way longer, you know. So you had this account, when Jake wanted to go through the king's highway, all right, which was a straight shot to the land, but Amalek was like, nah, y'all niggas can't come through. And he came out with the military, you know, and he came against the women and children at the back, because he's Amalek is a damn coward too, man. Okay, he's a damn coward. You see, this nigga play tough when he got the major advantage, but you know, to his core, Amalek a coward. All right, that's why you see him having to go get America, okay, to to start this war with Iran. Okay, because Amalek is a coward by nature. Deuteronomy 25 and 17 said, remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way when you will come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way and smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not the Most High. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord thy power have given thee rest from all thine enemies round about, in the land which the Lord thy power giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, thou shalt blot out the remembrance from Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it. So that's the third time that the Lord spoke on blotting out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Thou shalt not forget it, man. And it wasn't that time, okay, but the Lord always showed his intent, what he wanted to do to Amalek. Even Samuel, he didn't fully obey. All right, he left the king alive, and okay, some of the livestock. And then when King David and Joab, they tried to achieve it, but you had a few Amalekites that got away. Okay, matter of fact. So let's go here. Let's jump to the book of Judges real quick, and we're just going through accounts. All right, these damn Amalekites, but these niggas is always there. Okay, so you go here to Judges, I believe that's 3 and 12. Let's see, it's 2 accounts in Judges. They short. All right. So you go to Judges here. We get to the point. The Judges, the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 12, it says, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And he gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek." Okay? So Moab, who did he go collab with? Ammon and Amalek. And you look at that digital infrastructure that China has, that's Amalek that's behind it. When you look at Moab today, and you look at this digital infrastructure, how Moab is so advanced, all right, technologically, well, that's Amalek that's behind that, man. That's financing that. Okay, it says, "And went and smote Israel and possessed the city of palm trees," man. Okay, so you see, Amalek, they don't miss an opportunity, man. Okay, when it comes to getting off on Israel, man. You see, we're so targeted as a people today because who's in power? Amalek. Okay, so you go to let's go to Judges chapter 6, all right, and start at 3. It says, "And so it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites came up and the Amalekites." So now they done linked up with the Midianites, which are descendants of Ishmael, okay, came up and the Amalekites, all right, and you see Esau has been clicked tight with them Ishmaelites in the Arabian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all right, the UAE, all right, Kuwait, all that infrastructure and that money, that revenue that flows through those Gulf Arab states. Well, Amalek is behind it. Okay. And it says, "And the children of the east, even they came up against them, and they camped against them and destroyed the increase of the earth till thou come unto Gaza, and left no substance, all right, sustenance for Israel, neither sheep nor ox, all right, nor ass, for they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came up as grasshoppers for multitude. For both they and their camels were without number, and they entered in to the land to destroy it." So they destroyed, the harvest, the livestock of Israel. Okay. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. Okay. And the Lord would eventually raise up a judge. Okay. And I believe this was Gideon, that will be raised up. Yeah, that will be Gideon. All right. That will raise up and deliver the children of Israel, from the Midianites, man. All right. But Amalek, all right, he's on the scene. This nigga's right there. Okay. And this nigga always needs somebody else too, for the most part, man, because he's a goddamn coward. Okay. So let's go from there. Let's get this in the book of, I believe that First Samuel. All right, let's go here to First Samuel chapter 30. Let's read this. This in the it's the book of First Samuel chapter 30 and 1. It says, 3 days later, when David and his men, were reading NLT, when David and his men arrived home at their town in Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag and burnt it to the ground. They had carried off women and children. Okay, goddamn cowards. Like today, they do airstrikes mainly on women and children. Okay, they had carried off women and children and everyone else, all right, without killing anyone. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they could weep no more. David's two wives, all right, Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel, were among those captured. David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord his power, you know. So Jake, was pissed. They felt they was in their feelings, man. You come back and your wives and sons and daughters gone, okay. So he was in their feelings, but King David, he did what he did. He turned to his rock, Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. He did what was work for him thus far. Okay. Then he said to Abathar the priest, "Bring me the ephod." Abiathar brought it. Then David asked the Lord, "Should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them?" And the Lord told him, "Yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you." So David and his 600 men set out, and they came to the brook, all right, Besser. It showed you that David, he would always go to the counsel of the Lord before he made a move. Show you he didn't trust in his own strength and his own might, all right, or his own strategy. He trusted in the Lord. It says, but 200 of the men were too exhausted to cross the brook. So David continued the pursuit with 400 men. Along the way, they found an Egyptian man in the field and brought him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. They also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisin, for he hadn't eaten anything he hadn't had anything to eat or drink for 3 days and nights. Before long, his strength returned. To whom do you belong, and where do you come from? David asked him, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite." He replied, "My master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick." A wicked nigga, man. A wicked nigga, man. It says, "We were on our way back from raiding the Kerethites in the Negev, the territory of Judah, in the land of Caleb, and we had just burned Ziklag. Will you lead me to this band of raiders?" David asked. The young man replied, "If you take an oath in the Most High's name that you will not kill me or give me back to my master, then I will guide you to them." So he led David to them, and they found the Amalekites spread out across the fields, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines in the land, all right, in the land of Judah. So they're partying and celebrating, okay, in their wickedness. They got through stealing and plundering, okay, kidnapping, okay. Show you that these are the same devils today. They celebrate the same thing. Okay. It said David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout the night and the entire next day until evening. Now it said none of the Amalekites escaped except 400 young men who fled on camels. David got everything the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued, all right, his 2 wives. So King David, they were trying to get rid of these niggas then, okay, but you had 400 young men, all right, who got out of there, okay, but King David and his men, they were trying to blot them niggas out then, okay. It said nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David bought everything back. He also recovered all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock. This plunder belongs to David, they said. So the Lord allowed David and his men to get back their families, all right, and also the spoils, okay, of the Amalekites. Okay, so they was able to be enriched. Not only were they restored, all right, but they had got then some. They restored everything they lost and then some. Was what the Lord is getting ready to do to us in this time, man. To restore everything and then some. Okay, so you go back to here. I believe this First Kings 11, and when you jump down, because King David, he was trying to get their ass out of there. This is First Kings 11 and 15. It said years before David had defeated Edom, Joab, his army commander, had stayed to bury some of the Israelite soldiers who had died in battle. While there, they killed every male in Edom. Okay, it said Joab and the army of Israel had stayed there 6 months. All right, killing them. All right, but Hadad, okay, and a few of his father's royal officers escaped and headed for Egypt. Hadad was just a boy at the time, so you had a few Amalekites escape, man. But Joab, they stayed there 6 months, all right, killing every male in Edom. So they it just wasn't time, okay? But it's been a rivalry, all right, a heated rivalry between Jacob and Esau, man. And Amalek is always at the forefront, okay? This nigga's always at the forefront, man. But now we're in the time, all right, where the devil, he's finna be defeated, put in captivity, all right, and blotted out for good. Okay? When you go here to Isaiah chapter 14, okay, the Lord finna get this nigga out of there for good this time, man. Isaiah 14 and 21, it said, prepare slaughter, all right, for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities, man. Okay? So you Edomites of today are prepared for a slaughter. Okay? You're finna lose this war terribly. Okay? You're finna terribly lose this Third World War. All right? And you're going into captivity. You see? And after 1,000 years, you're going to be eradicated from the earth. Okay? You'll never be able to have, all right, a civilization in the earth again. You see? You'll never be able to fill the face of the world with cities. You'll never have any influence. You won't exist. Okay? He said, for I will rise up against them, said the Lord, and cut off from Babylon the name, the remnant, and son and nephew, said the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. Okay? So the Lord is getting to the point to now he's going to fulfill, all right, taking the remembrance of Amalek, which is Esau, because Amalek is just a part, okay? He's just one people of the nation of Edom, okay? But you get down here, let's get this to Job 18, all right? This Job 18 and 16 says, his root shall be dried up beneath, and the bud shall his branch be cut off. And this is utter annihilation. Because if you remove the roots of something and you cut off the branches, it's over with. It's impossible for that tree to come back. If you dig a tree up from its roots and then you cut the branches off, it's impossible. Okay? So the Lord's going to cut that line of Edom out the earth, man. Okay? By default, it includes Amalek. His remembrance shall perish from the earth. You see? That's letting you know, because who has the Lord said that about all throughout the scriptures? Amalek, man. Which Amalek is just a representative of Esau. Okay? He's the chief tribe. And he shall have no name in the street, man. He's not going to be remembered, man. Okay? It's going to come a time where Esau is not remembered as a people, man. Okay, he says, he shall be driven from light into darkness and chased out of the world. He shall neither have son nor nephew among his people, nor any remaining, all right, in his dwellings. Okay, they that come after him shall be astonished at his day, and as they that went before were frightened. Surely such are the dwellings of the wicked, and this is the place of him that knoweth not the Most High. All right, and there's no one that's more rebellious, okay, then you Edomites, man. And of Esau, you have Amalek, which is the most rebellious, man. All right, but eventually the Lord's going to cut you devils out, man. So that's the point. Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edify us. And next time I say Shalom, Kwame Mashallah, and Bible Ball soon.